Greetings everybody, this is Maurice aka Mo the Educator from AlumniRoundup.com, and I want to take a few minutes to address a recent article that I wrote for AlumniRoundup.com that addressed Niggas in Paris and Niggas in Poorest, the two songs by Kanye West and Jay-Z, and of course the latter being by Yasiin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def. Since I wrote that article, I've seen a lot of people in a lot of different outlets, media have been engaging in a discussion, and really that was my intent for the article, to be a catalyst for the excellent types of discussions that have cascaded since the article was written. And so I do want to thank everybody who has been engaging in the discussion. Now, of course, I'm not going to catalyze the discussion and then leave myself out of it. So I guess that was my 2 cents. I'm gonna end up with 4 at the end of this short video. So I want to begin by talking a bit about what Young Guru said in his video response to my article. I want to shout out my HU brother for engaging in the conversation as well, and thank him for doing so. So the point of the article first is to acknowledge the real social commentary that's happening in the song Niggas in Paris that I think a lot of people missed. Jay-Z and Kanye are engaging in a real dialogue with people. It's simplistic, but they're engaging with a real dialogue with people, and they're talking from an empowered standpoint, and they're talking about the types of power which they're taking, the power of the privileged, the power of white, European, high fashion, high art, and of course the capital that we attribute to those things, high fashion and high art, and that type of ultimate power and privilege is often the city of Paris, right? So in Niggas in Paris, they're talking about how they, two black Americans, right, have engaged and have learned this language of power. I'm going to learn how to speak to you in your language. You can't hold me back from this. Oh, and now that we're in Paris, right, now that we're in Paris, as Kanye says, I got my niggas in Paris and we're going gorillas. I know my East Coast folks say, oh man, it's bananas. You know, Kanye's like, we're going beyond that, we're going gorillas. But he's purposefully playing to that conception of, in particular, black males, what Toni Morrison calls that master narrative, right? That conception of black males as beasts, as intellectually inferior, as incapable of engaging in so-called high culture and European or white culture. So in that song, they're really challenging those things. They're talking about ownership, like when Jay talks about owning the Nets and moving the Nets to Brooklyn. You know, it's a nod to the fact that, hey, I'm engaging again in these types of power. You can't stop me from engaging in this type of power and from speaking to you about it. And I said, you know, in the article that is wrapped in the bacon, right? I know Google took exception to, you know, the concept that is wrapped in the bacon of a hype beat, you know, and rattling the speakers or something that you can play at the club. But that's so important, right? That's just, you know, kind of, we talk about like wrapping things in bacon, right? Like taking something, you know, kind of taking that fluff or that extra, you know, that real catchy part, you know, just the bacon. You know, nothing that's ultimately important when it comes to the social commentary, but just taking that and wrapping it. So, okay, I'm going to speak to you about this subversive topic, and I'm going to talk to you about this type of black empowerment, but I'm going to do it over this hot beat. So anytime you hear it and it's in your car, you're going to turn it up. Or if it's at the club, you're going to get out and start shaking your behind to it. But I'm still feeding you. Wrapped inside, there's that medicine in there. I'm still feeding you this message, this empowered black message. So I want to reiterate that point. And I do appreciate the social commentary that's in Niggas in Paris, in which Kanye West and Jay-Z engage. Now, on the other hand, on the other side, with Niggas in Poorest, Yasiin Bey, formerly, of course, known as Mos Def, engages in something different, right? And there are actually two things that are competing. Stay with me with this, right? So niggas in Poorest, Yasiin Bey is not talking about the same language of empowerment and capturing that language of empowerment. He's talking about something different, right? He's talking about revolution, right? Because when he says, like when Kanye says, I got my niggas in Paris and they going guerrillas, he says it be them niggas in Poorest that be them rebel guerrillas, right? G-U-E, guerrillas. So he's talking about people who are engaging in revolution. Here's the thing, right, about revolution and capturing the throne or watching the throne. Those are two competing ideologies, and those are two competing philosophies, right? Because revolution is something that happens from the margins. It comes from the marginalized, right? But when you're talking about occupying the throne, like maybe you can call that a coup, right? If you're going to take over the throne, but there's no such thing as revolution from the top down. Revolution from the top down, that's hegemony, right? That's just taking one status quo, taking one form of oppression and replacing it with another. Now, the small part of that is learning how to speak that language, like I said, like they're doing in Niggas in Paris. But revolution is different. There's no such thing as top-down revolution, right? Revolution has to come from the bottom up, and that's where the niggas in Poorest in Yasiin Bey's song, that's where they're coming from. They're coming from that margin. So those are ultimately my points. I want to leave you with this because I know a lot of people have engaged in this idea like, okay, well, yeah, what Mose is talking about, that's real hip hop, or this is what hip hop is actually about. It's about this revolution and talking about people who are impoverished and the difficulties and challenges that people face, and it's not this luxury rap in which Kanye and Jay-Z have engaged. But be careful about engaging in nostalgia about hip hop, because that's not really what hip hop started out as, right? The music started out as DJs creating break beats. There was no lyrics to it. It was just DJs creating break beats. And from that break beat, they were engaging in a form of revolutionary. Like, we're going to take your disco record and just cut into this part that we want. And then B-boys started dancing to it. They said, we're not going to do these silly looking disco dances. We're going to start B-boying, right? We're going to engage in this energetic, this frenetic paced dance. So it started there, right? So when you finally got the MC added to it and people started engaging in lyricism, the whole thing was about the party, right? Because these things happen on a street corner on a piece of cardboard, or they happen at, some clubs in the Bronx in New York, right? So what they're engaging in was not revolution, they're engaging in partying. And when a song like The Message first came out, read Can't Stop, Won't Stop by Jeff Chang. Look what Africa Bambaataa, what Kool Herc, what Melly Mel himself, these pioneers were saying about the message. It was like, this is not what the music is about. The music is not about what's terrible and what's happening in the hood. Chuck D later on said it's the CNN of the hood, CNN of the ghetto. But they were like, that's not what this is about. The music is actually about partying, so we can get away from all these things that happen. I understand, no question, those brothers engaged in a lot of things that were community building, and the Zulu Nation still continues. African Bambaataa Zulu Nation still continues to do phenomenal things to this day. But that's not what it was about originally. It was about partying, right? So ultimately what that means is, bring this whole thing full circle. Ultimately what that means is there's a place in hip hop for niggas in Paris. There's a place in hip hop for niggas in Poorest. I'm not prioritizing one over the other. They can coexist, and also be mindful that in understanding that even though hip hop can be about revolution, doesn't mean it has to be about revolution. There's niggas in Paris, there's niggas in Poorest, and there's everything in between. I'm Mo the Educator for AlumniRoundup.com. We out.